previous year questions of UGC NET law with respect to public international law. So today what I have done is that I have picked the most recent questions that came from the area of public international law in UGC NET law. And something I found very surprising, and that was that in the last examination, there were 20 questions out of 100 from public international law in the law paper. So it can just tell you how important means the people who are making the paper is consider public international law, and literally it is a very it's quite obvious that it must be his favorite subject of the examiner or the person who is setting the paper. So you will have to take care of this particular area in order to prepare for UGC NET law, public international law. So what we are going to do today is that we are going to study every question and we are going to seek to see that what is running inside the mind of the examiner when he is setting these questions. आपको ये ध्यान रखना है कि जब आप क्वेश्चन पढ़ने वाले हैं तो वो क्वेश्चन आपको क्या बता रहा है कि आपको तैयारी कैसे करनी है, ये चीज आपको ध्यान में रख के आपको सिर्फ आंसर नहीं जाना है. Don't try to see these questions or answers from the point of view of ki I need to know the answer of this question. Don't tackle these issues or these areas like that. You try to study every option, try to know about every option. That is the way you are going to tackle the exam. So we'll start. See, the first question is with respect to assertion and reason. Assertion and reasoning is a very common kind of question that comes in almost all the competitive exams. असर्शन और रीजन का मतलब बहुत सारे कॉम्पिटिटिव एग्जाम्स में आता है और बहुत ही सिंपल वे में मैं बताऊँ तो इसमें क्या होता है कि आपके पास दो स्टेटमेंट्स होते हैं, स्टेटमेंट 1 और स्टेटमेंट 2. स्टेटमेंट 1 को असर्शन बोलते हैं, स्टेटमेंट 2 को रीजन बोलते हैं. होता क्या है कि ये दो स्टेटमेंट्स आपको दिए जाते हैं और चार ऑप्शंस आपके पास आएंगे. चार ऑप्शंस में क्या है कि क्या ये दोनों स्टेटमेंट सही हैं, और जो सेकंड ऑप्शन है, सॉरी सेकंड स्टेटमेंट जो है वो फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट का एक्सप्लेनेशन है. दूसरा ऑप्शन ये हो सकता है कि दोनों स्टेटमेंट सही है लेकिन जो सेकंड ऑप्शन सेकंड स्टेटमेंट वो फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट का एक्सप्लेनेशन नहीं है. तीसरा ये हो सकता है कि पहला स्टेटमेंट सही है, दूसरा स्टेटमेंट गलत है. चौथा ये हो सकता है कि दूसरा स्टेटमेंट सही है, पहला स्टेटमेंट गलत है. सो देयर माइट बी फोर ऑप्शंस, देयर आर फोर ऑप्शंस हियर एंड देयर आर फोर पॉसिबिलिटीज दैट assertion is correct, reason is correct, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Second, assertion is correct, reason is correct, but reason is not the correct explanation of the assertion. Third is assertion is wrong, reason is right. Or fourth, assertion is right, but reason is wrong. So there are four possibilities with respect to two statements, and you will have to see to it that when you are reading those two statements, are they making sense, in order to see to it that the second statement is directly following, is giving, explaining the first statement. That is so simple. आपको ये देखना है कि क्या दूसरा स्टेटमेंट, अगर ये दोनों स्टेटमेंट सही हैं तो क्या दूसरा स्टेटमेंट फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट को सही तरीके से एक्सप्लेन कर पा रहा है, ये आपको चेक करना है. आप लोग अब पढ़ते हैं. असर्शन ए, व्हाट इज इट सेइंग? Multilateral treaties which declare the established customary international law may bind even non-parties. Reason: Article 38 of the Vienna Convention makes an exception to Article 34 or Article 37 of the Vienna Convention. In light of the above statements, choose the most appropriate from the options given below. Just see the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, 1969. What does it talk? Section 4, Treaties and Third States. This is a part within Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties. Article 34 says of Vienna Convention, a treaty does not create either obligations or rights for a third state without its consent. कोई भी समझौता किसी तीसरे पार्टी, किसी थर्ड स्टेट के लिए कोई ऑब्लिगेशंस या राइट्स क्रिएट नहीं करती है विदाउट उसके सहमति के बिना. उसके सहमति के बिना कोई ऑब्लिगेशंस या राइट्स क्रिएट नहीं करती है. फिर से पढ़ते हैं. A treaty does not create either obligations or rights for a third state without its consent. That means if there is a treaty that has been signed, that has been agreed to between different parties, and if there is a third country, there is a third state, there is a third party which has not been a party to that treaty, so without its consent, that treaty will not bind that particular third state. This is very simple. You read the second article, Article 35 of Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. The third state expressly accepts the obligation in writing. तभी treaty उस थर्ड स्टेट पे लागू हो सकता है अगर वो थर्ड स्टेट एक्सप्रेसली एक्सेप्ट करे दैट आई विल बी ऑब्लिगेटेड और आई विल बी बाउंड बाय दिस ट्रीटी इन राइटिंग, वो राइटिंग में लिख कर दे कि मैं ये जो समझौता हो रहा है इसके ये वाले पार्ट से मैं ऑब्लिगेटेड हूं, मैं इस समझौते से जो भी ऑब्लिगेशन निकलेंगे, जो भी मेरे प्रति मेरे तरफ से कर्तव्य करने का काम होगा वो मैं पूरा करूंगा। तो वो रिटेन में अगर वो देगा तो ही वो ट्रीटी उसके ऊपर लागू होगा। अब आप आर्टिकल 38 पढ़ो। रूल्स इन अ ट्रीटी becoming binding on third states through international custom. Nothing in Articles 34 to 37 precludes a rule set forth in a treaty from becoming binding upon third state as a customary rule of international law recognized as such. ये क्या कहना चाह रहा? What is it trying to say? Article 38 is saying that despite the fact that Article 34 to Article 37 are giving exception, are telling that third parties are not bound by treaties they have not signed, they have not accepted, or they have not agreed to, except if that treaty is creating customary international law. If that treaty is creating customary international law, if that treaty is resulting in customary international law, then despite the fact that a third party has not signed that treaty, that third party will be bound by that treaty. भले ही आर्टिकल 34 से आर्टिकल 37 ये कह रहा है कि कोई अगर उस समझौते को सहमति नहीं देता तो वो उस समझौते से उत्पन्न होने वाले कर्तव्यों से मतलब टोटली मुक्त है, लेकिन अगर अगर वो ट्रीटी वो समझौता अगर कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ रिजल्ट कर रहा है तो भले वो थर्ड पार्टी है, दैट थर्ड पार्टी विल बी बाउंड बाय इट। बहुत सिंपल है। अब हम लोग इसको पढ़ते हैं, क्या लिखा हुआ है? मल्टीलैटरल ट्रीटीज विच डिक्लेयर द एस्टैब्लिश्ड कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ मे बाइंड इवन नॉन पार्टीज। बिल्कुल आर्टिकल 38 कह रहा है वियना कन्वेंशन ऑफ लॉ ट्रीटीज बाइंड कर देगा अगर वो कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ बना रहा है वो ट्रीटी। आर्टिकल 38 ऑफ द वियना कन्वेंशन मेक्स एन एक्सेप्शन टू आर्टिकल 34 और 37। यहाँ पे 2 होना चाहिए, ये एग्जामिनेशन क्वेश्चन जो बनाया गया है उसमें थोड़ा सा यहाँ पे 2 होना चाहिए था। आर्टिकल 34 और आर्टिकल 37 ऑफ द वियना कन्वेंशन इन द लाइट ऑफ द स्टेटमेंट्स चूज द मोस्ट। अब देखो एक्सप्लेन कर रहा है आर्टिकल 38 ऑफ द वियना कन्वेंशन मेक्स एन एक्सेप्शन टू आर्टिकल 34 टू आर्टिकल 7। हो सकता है, कब हो सकता है? अगर वो कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ बना रहा है। रीजन जो असर्शन को एक्सप्लेन कर रहा है, रीजन इज गिवन एक्सप्लेनेशन टू assertion. Both statements are correct. Multilateral treaties which declare the established customary international law may bind even non-parties. Article 38 of the Vienna Convention makes an exception to Article 34 to Article 37 of the Vienna Convention, explaining it. That is also correct. Now again, this question I'll put in the tough category, but important category, because questions keep coming from Vienna Convention or law of treaties because it's an important treaty. You'll have to study it. You'll have to study the time, the year when it came into force. आपको ये पढ़ना होगा कि वियना कन्वेंशन ऑफ लॉ ऑफ ट्रीटीज के इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स क्या हैं, जैसे कि कौन से ईयर में वो फोर्स में आया, क्या उसके इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स हैं। कुछ ऐसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स वियना कन्वेंशन ऑफ लॉ ऑफ ट्रीटीज जो आपको पता ही होने चाहिए, आपको नहीं पता ऐसा होना नहीं चाहिए, आपको तैयारी करके जाना होगा, आपको वियना कन्वेंशन ऑन लॉ ऑफ ट्रीटीज पढ़ के जाना होगा एग्जाम के लिए। यू हैव टू गो प्रिपेयरिंग Vienna Convention of Law of Treaties when you are going to examination. See, second question is the following is known as safety net of international humanitarian law. What does it mean? First of all, this question I'll categorize as tough question. Like I would say that I will put it in a level or in an area which will come as very tough. ये क्वेश्चन अच्छा बहुत टफ है और ये क्वेश्चन जिन लोगों ने इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ अच्छे से पढ़ा है वही सॉल्व कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि चारों ऑप्शंस ऐसे ऑप्शंस हैं जो जनरली आपको जल्दी पढ़ने को नहीं मिलते हैं। What is the question? The following is known as safety net of international humanitarian law. जो एक रक्षा कवच की तरह, एक रक्षा कवच की तरह काम करता है वो इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ का। इन चारों में से कौन सा ऐसा ऑप्शन है जिसको इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ का रक्षा कवच भी कह सकते हैं? लेवी एंड मास्से, हॉर्स दे कॉम्बैट, हेनरी ड्यूनन्स क्लॉज, मार्टेन्स क्लॉज। उसके पहले हम लोग पढ़ते हैं कि ये चारों का मतलब क्या है। लेवी एंड मास्से is a French term used for policy of mass national conscription, often in the face of invasion. का मतलब यह है कि कॉन्स्क्रिप्शन या ड्राफ्टिंग एक बहुत सारे कंट्रीज, इंडिया में ऐसा नहीं है लेकिन बहुत सारे कंट्रीज में ऐसा पहले होता था या अभी भी होता है कि वहाँ पे एक पर्टिकुलर एज हो जाने के बाद एक आपको आर्मी कंपल्सरीली ज्वाइन करना है। मतलब कि देयर आर कंट्रीज इन द वर्ल्ड where you will have to join army at a particular age. Levian-Masse means that if the country is attacked, अगर आपके देश पे हमला हो जाए और आपके स्टेट, आपका जो गवर्नमेंट है वो आपको ये कर सकता है कि लार्ज नंबर पे सब आर्मी कंपल्सरीली ज्वाइन करना है, तो ये लेवियन मास से है कि अगर आपके देश पे हमला हो जा रहा है, इफ योर कंट्री इज बीइंग इन्वेडेड, अटैक्ड, then what will happen is that the government will be the state can enforce forceful compulsory joining of army in large number, that is लेवियन मास से. क्लियरली इसका सेफ्टी नेट से तो कुछ लेना देना नहीं लग रहा है. हॉर्स दे कॉम्बैट क्या बोलना चाह रहा है? हॉर्स दे कॉम्बैट इज अ टर्म यूज्ड इन इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ to describe a soldier who cannot fight due to being sick, wounded, captured or incapacitated. अगर अगर इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ में ये कहा जा रहा है कि ऐसे सोल्जर्स भी होते हैं जो इसलिए लड़ाई नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि वो या तो बीमार है, या वो अपाहिज हो चुके हैं, या वो किसी कारण से लड़ने में असमर्थ हैं, या फिर वो फंस चुके हैं, दुश्मन के द्वारा कैप्चर कर चुके हैं, कैप्चर्ड, तो वो लड़ाई नहीं कर सकते. उस तरह के सोल्जर्स के लिए हॉर्स दे कॉम्बैट टर्म का यूज होता है. हॉर्स दे कॉम्बैट इज यूज्ड टू डिनोट दोज सोल्जर्स हु कैन नॉट फाइट अ वॉर ड्यू टू द इनएबिलिटी ऑफ disability, if they are captured, if they are sick, or if they are incapacitated. This is also a French term. तीसरा, थर्ड आप देखोगे, in it he proposed, this is, read this, Henry Dunant's clause. Henry Dunant's clause says that all nations should establish or organizations to help sick, wounded victims of war regardless of nationality. हेनरी ड्यूनंट ये कहना चाह रहा है कि हर एक कंट्री को ऐसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्टैब्लिश करने चाहिए जो सिख और घायल लोगों को, जो विक्टिम्स हैं, जो लोग मतलब जिन पे मतलब जो लड़ाई के बीच में किसी तरीके से फंस गए हैं या किसी उनके ऊपर अत्याचार हो रहा है, तो उनके लिए ऐसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बनाने चाहिए, ऐसे संगठन बनाने चाहिए जो उनका ध्यान रख सके युद्ध के बीच में. इसको कहते हैं हेनरी ड्यूनंट्स लाइन, हेनरी ड्यूनंट्स क्लॉज. ऑल्सो एक इंपॉर्टेंट चीज यहां पे आपको याद रखनी होगी कि ड्यूनेंट के कारण ही रेड क्रॉस का एस्टैब्लिशमेंट हुआ था. दैट्स व्हाई ही वाज when the Red Cross by different name was founded, what happened is that he became its secretary. कोई ऊपर है नहीं, इंटरनेट के लिए बुलाया था. मतलब मैं रिकॉर्डिंग कर रहा हूँ वीडियो का, आप यहाँ पे उधर जाके बात करना. Actually, I'm sorry. So what happens here is that there is another clause, that is Martin's clause. Now you see the safety net of international humanitarian law. What is it? It ensures that civilians and combatants remain under the realm of humanity in situations not covered by other treaties or customary laws. This is Martin's clause. Martin's clause क्या कह रहा है? Martin's clause कह रहा है कि अगर लड़ाई हो रही है, अगर युद्ध हो रही है और उस युद्ध में if there is a war that is going on and in that particular war there is no law, there is no treaty that is governing that particular situation, in that situation also some victims or some groups who are not part of that war but they are civilians, even in combatants, those who are part of that war, they remain under the realm of humanity. मतलब कि भले ही उस युद्ध में, अगर जो युद्ध हो रहा है उसमें लॉ नहीं है कोई, अगर उसमें कोई कानून नहीं है जिसको लेके रेगुलेट किया जा सकता है कि किसी के ऊपर किस तरह का व्यवहार करना है, सोल्जर के प्रति या फिर जो सिविलियन है, मतलब जो लोग लड़ाई में शामिल नहीं, लेकिन वहां पे भी इंसानियत, मानवता जो है उसके आधार पे हमें उनको प्रोटेक्शन देना चाहिए. ये कह रहा है मार्टिन्स क्लॉज. भले ही कोई लॉ नहीं है, भले ही कोई ट्रीटी नहीं, अगर कोई लड़ाई चल रहा है, इट इज वी शुड सी टू इट दैट दोज people are protected via humanity and public conscience. So this is something you'll have to remember. This is safety net. Why? See what is he saying. The human person remains under the protection of the principles of humanity and dictates of the public conscience इन केसेस नॉट कवर्ड बाय द लॉ इन्फोर्स, भले ही कोई लॉ नहीं है फिर भी इंसानियत के आधार पे उनको प्रोटेक्शन मिलना चाहिए. दिस इज मार्टिन्स क्लॉज, सेफ्टी नेट ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ. बचा रहा है, लोगों को बचा रहा है, कवच की तरह काम कर रहा है, वर्किंग एज अ शील्ड, humanitarian shield for even those people who are not protected by any kind of law in that particular ongoing war. This question is just a second. This question is a bit tough. Sorry, not tough, but very important. I will just say that. This question is very important from the point of view of UGC NET or any law competitive examination. Why am I saying that? Since I have started studying law, I have been encountering question related to this particular doctrine or very much related doctrine. So I will discuss that. But you'll have to remember that Estrada doctrine was propounded by Estrada, who happened to be the foreign minister of Mexico. You will have to remember this. Estrada doctrine was propounded by a Mexican. What is Estrada doctrine? Here you will see that I have mentioned 4 doctrines. These 4 doctrines, any doctrine can come in the examination. They always ask these questions. Any doctrine can come anytime, so you'll have to remember all the 4 doctrines. There is no other option. आपको ये चारों doctrine याद करने पड़ेंगे. There is no other option. Estrada doctrine says, is suppose if in any country a government comes by force, not by democratic means, let us assume, Mexico will not decide whether that country's government should be recognized or not. Mexico will not get involved in the domestic affairs of that particular country. That is a Estrada doctrine. उस देश में कोई गवर्नमेंट नहीं जो आई, वो डेमोक्रेटिकली इलेक्टेड या डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस के थ्रू आई या फोर्स के थ्रू आई या मिलिट्री कू के तरीके से आई, इससे मेक्सिको का कोई लेना देना नहीं है. मेक्सिको विल नॉट recognize or not recognize. Mexico has nothing to do with interfering in the internal affairs of that country. That is the Estrada doctrine. States that Mexico should not make positive or negative judgments about the governments or changes in government of other nations because such an action would imply a breach to their sovereignty. The policy is based on the principles of non-intervention, peaceful resolution of disputes, self-determination of all nations. बहुत सिंपल है. मेक्सिको तय नहीं करेगा कि दूसरे देश में वो जो सरकार आ रही है वो प्रजातंत्र और डेमोक्रेटिकली इलेक्टेड तरीके से आ रही है या फिर कोई फोर्स के थ्रू आर्मी, थ्रू अदर टाइप ऑफ नॉन डेमोक्रेटिक फोर्स, नॉन डेमोक्रेटिक मैनर में आ रही है. ये आपको ध्यान रखना होगा. टोबा डॉक्ट्रिन. टोबा डॉक्ट्रिन क्या है? अगेन एस्ट्राडा डॉक्ट्रिन का जस्ट ऑपोजिट. Just you need to remember that Estrada doctrine is, if Estrada doctrine is saying that I will go this way, the Toba doctrine is saying that I'll just go the opposite way. ये just Estrada doctrine की opposite है. Toba doctrine कह रही है कि recognition can only be given to those governments which come to power by legitimate democratic means. जो governments are coming in power through democratic means, we will recognize only those governments. This is Toba doctrine. Toba doctrine was enunciated by Carlos Tobar, the Minister of Foreign Relations, Foreign Minister of Ecuador. Again, you'll have to remember in 1907. This is something you'll have to remember. Foreign Minister of Ecuador. Estrada, Foreign Minister of Mexico. Stimson's doctrine. Stimson doctrine is also very simple, but it is very important. It says that, again, he was also US Secretary of State, is also the foreign minister of the US, equivalent to the foreign minister of the US. Principle of non-recognizing the states which came into existence as a result of aggression. Suppose if a country invades another country, creates a new state by taking some part of that country forcefully. Stimson doctrine says we will not recognize that new state. What is it saying? अगर मान लेते हैं कि कोई एक देश दूसरे देश पर हमला करता है, उसके कुछ पार्ट, उस देश का कुछ पार्ट लेकर एक नया स्टेट बना देता है या अपने साथ जोड़ लेता है. स्टिम्सन कह रहा है, स्टिम्सन डॉक्ट्रिन, वी विल नॉट रिकॉग्नाइज दैट annexation of the territory. We will not recognize it because it has been done through force, through aggression. जबरदस्ती किया गया है. We will not recognize it. This is हेनरी स्टिम्सन। इसमें आपको दो लैटिन फ्रेजेस याद करने पड़ेंगे। एक है इंजुरिया जुस नॉन ओरिटर, जिसका मतलब है, क्या लिखा, एक्स इंजुरिया जुस नॉन ऑरिटर, विच मीन्स इलीगल एक्ट्स डू नॉट क्रिएट लॉ। अगर मैं कोई गलत काम कर रहा हूं और उसके बाद लोग एक्सेप्ट कर लें, उसको एक तरीके से लॉ बना दे, तब तो इसका मतलब है कि मुझे बढ़ावा मिल रहा है। आई एम बीइंग इनकरेज टू डू रॉन्ग। if by doing wrong, a new fact is emerging which is benefiting me and people are accepting it, it is encouraging me to do more wrong. You see, Stimson doctrines try to impede it. It's saying no, if you are engaging in a behavior which in a particular manner is trying to impede, or trying to hinder. You see, Stimson doctrine, what is saying, if it is trying to hinder, it is trying to hinder aggression by one state in another state to create a new state, or trying to take some part of the territory of one state in order to add it to its own. So if that happens, Stimson doctrine says we are not going to recognize that change. There is another Latin term, ex factis jus oritor, in which the existence of facts creates law, but it's just the opposite. Like I through my force, through my actions, change the circumstances. The other people will accept it. So this particular phrase will apply. तब ये phrase apply होने वाला है कि एक ये है कि मैं चेंज कर दूं सिस्टम, मैं पूरा कंडीशन चेंज कर दूं, मैं पूरा सर्कमस्टांस में पूरा जो अपने आसपास की एरिया उसको चेंज कर दूं। मैंने गलत तरीके से किया, लोग एक्सेप्ट कर ले क्योंकि अब ये हो चुका है, तब ये दूसरा फ्रेज यूज हो जाएगा। लेकिन अगर मान लेते हैं कि मैंने ऐसा गलत काम किया लेकिन उसको एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया जाएगा, क्यों? क्योंकि उससे मुझे बढ़ावा मिलेगा। स्टिम्सन डॉक्ट्रिन, वी विल नॉट रिकॉग्नाइज if you engage in a behavior which by forcefully you seek to take or change the territorial borders of any country and try to take the territory to create a new state or to try to attach it to yourself. That's Stimson doctrine. Holstein doctrine, you'll have to have some level of knowledge of Cold War. Actually, what happened is that when Second World War got over, Germany was divided into two parts. That was GDR, German Democratic Republic, and then there was West Germany. So West Germany came up with a policy that was West Germany was also known as Federal Republic of Germany, which eventually in 1990 the both Germany got united and it became again Federal Republic of Germany under West Germany. The East Germany came under the complete control of West Germany. So what happened is that the West Germany after the during the Cold War came up with a policy saying that if any country recognizes East Germany, that is German Democratic Republic, the official name, we will not have any kind of relationship with that country. अगर कोई कंट्री ईस्ट जर्मनी को रिकॉग्नाइज करेगी तो वेस्ट जर्मनी उसके साथ कोई संबंध नहीं रखेगा। ये है हॉल्स्टीन डॉक्ट्रिन। सीधी बात है। आज जैसे कि चाइना में ऐसा होता है कि चाइना एंड ताइवान, चाइना सेज दैट एनी कंट्री which has diplomatic relations with Taiwan, we will not have relations with that particular country. Holstein doctrine. You'll have to remember these four doctrines. There are no other ways. आपको ये चारों याद होने चाहिए, अच्छे से याद होने चाहिए। The preamble of the UN Charter says, ये फोर्थ क्वेश्चन है। अब इसमें आप देखो कि प्रियम्बल ऑफ द यूएन चार्टर के बारे में क्वेश्चन पूछा जा रहा है, मतलब आपको प्रियम्बल ऑफ द यूएन के बारे में पता होना चाहिए। यू शुड नो अबाउट द प्रियम्बल ऑफ द यूनाइटेड नेशंस चार्टर because they are asking questions. So you'll have to study the UN Charter carefully. You'll have to read the preamble. See, the preamble of the UN Charter says, "We the peoples of the United Nations." Second option क्या? The preamble of the United Nations Charter says, "We the people of the United Nations." अब फिर से पढ़ो क्या लिखा हुआ है। द प्रियम्बल ऑफ द यूनाइटेड नेशंस चार्टर से आपको दोनों ऑप्शन सेम लग रहा होगा, पर एक्चुअली ये सेम नहीं है। दे बोथ ऑप्शंस माइट लुक वेरी सिमिलर टू यू, बट एक्चुअली दे आर नॉट सेम। You see, in the first, there is written "We the peoples of the United Nations." In second, "We the people of the United Nations." So actually, the right is "We the peoples." "We the peoples" is right here. You'll have to remember this in the UN Charter. Maintenance of international peace and security is a primary responsibility of Security Council. Yes, that is true. United Nations has 6 organizations. Among them, General Assembly and United Nations Security Council also come. But to maintain peace and security all around the world is the primary responsibility of the Security Council. That you'll have to remember. Maintenance of international peace and security is the primary responsibility of International Court of Justice. No, not correct. Maintenance of international peace and security is the primary responsibility of the General Assembly. Again, not correct. So which is correct? The preamble of the UN Charter says we the peoples of the United Nations. And C, maintenance of international peace and security is the primary responsibility of the Security Council. So second is correct. You see that. See this is the preamble of the United Nations. We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime, twice, First World War, Second World War, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights in the second line, in the dignity and worth of the human person, dignity and worth of the human person, very important phrase, in the equal rights of men and women of nations large and small, giving equal rights to men and women. At that time women was not used, means it was being, see, at that point of time women are being given equal rights by the UN Charter, and of nations large and small, whether the nation is small or large. See, there is some kind of equality is being promoted, to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of living, better standards of life in larger freedom. So you'll have to remember this entire preamble. There is no other alternative. Don't try to memorize it. Just try to keep reading it. आपको 3 से 4 बार ये पढ़ना पड़ेगा. कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट फ्रेजेस आपको समझने पड़ेंगे और उनको ध्यान से देखना पड़ेगा. क्वेश्चन आ सकती है यूनाइटेड नेशन चार्टर से. ये देखिए, ये क्वेश्चन मैं कहूँगा कि एक तरीके से इट्स इम्पॉर्टेंट एंड इट्स टफ. It's tough because generally extradition is not taught in classes so much, but nowadays they are asking questions from extradition a lot. Like when I was going through the questions, the 3 to 4 questions which I directly found are coming from extradition area. So extradition should be known by the students to prepare for the examination. International law recognizes general duty of state in respect of extradition. First option. International law does not recognize general duty of state in respect of extradition. Extradition depends on the provision of existing extradition treaties. Countries may grant extradition without a treaty. Customary international law governs extradition. Just read it. Which is the correct? B, C, and D. Which means international law does not recognize general duty of state in respect of extradition. It does not recognize general duty. General कोई ड्यूटी नहीं है कि स्टेट को. एक्स्ट्राडिशन का मतलब क्या है ये भी आपको बता देता हूँ. जैसे कि कोई, if someone commits a let me explain what is extradition. Suppose if someone commits some kind of criminal act for a particular country, okay, and he's in another country, and that country seeks to bring him to trial in their own country, so they will ask that particular country to hand over that person to this particular country. This process is known as extradition. They will request for extradition, extradite. That's why extradition, extradite. Extradition depends on the provision of existing extradition treaties. C is correct. Why? Because if treaties are there between two countries, that okay, if someone does wrong in my country, and uh, and he should be extradited from the other country where he's staying at this point of time. If that other country and my country, we both have signed extradition treaties, then he can be handed over to that particular country. Then only. Customary international law governs extradition. Not correct. Customary international law doesn't govern the area of extradition. Countries may grant extradition without a treaty. मान लेते हैं. Let us assume that there are two countries and both countries don't have a particular treaty over extradition between them. That if someone is there in one country and another country seeks to have that person, and there is no treaty, and yet suppose if the friendly relations exist between those two countries, this country can definitely hand over this person to the other country, despite the fact that there is no treaty with respect to extradition is existing between those countries. So it can happen. Countries may grant extradition without a treaty based upon friendly relations. See, international law recognizes no right to extradition apart from a treaty. International law कोई भी extradition का right नहीं समझती है, except if there is a treaty existing between those two countries from where he has to be extradited to the country where he has to get extradited. While a government may, if agreeable to its own constitution and laws, voluntarily exercise the power to surrender a fugitive from justice to the country from which he has fled away, and it has been said that it is under a moral duty to so. The country in which that particular person is staying at this point, that country out of its own moral obligations can choose to do so, but it is not legally bound to do so if there is no treaty existing between those two countries. That legal duty to demand his extradition and the correlative duty to surrender him to the demanding country exist only when created by treaty. Only if there is a treaty, तभी उसको एक्स्ट्राडाइट करके दूसरे कंट्री में ले जाया जा सकता है, लीगली स्पीकिंग. अगर लीगली वो कंट्री चाहती कि नहीं आपको देना होगा हमें, तभी जब दोनों कंट्री के बीच में ट्रीटी है, तभी वो व्यक्ति जिसने गलत किया है वो दूसरे कंट्री में उसको उस कंट्री में वापस भेजा जा सकता है. नहीं तो अगर वो कंट्री मना कर दे तो वो कंट्री कुछ नहीं कर सकती अगर कोई ट्रीटी दोनों के बीच में नहीं साइंड है. The general agreement in international law is that states are not obligated to surrender an alleged criminal to a foreign state because one principle of sovereignty is that every state has legal authority over the people within its borders. क्यों? इसलिए क्योंकि देर इज एक सहमति, आम सहमति है इंटरनेशनल लॉ में कि हर कंट्री का अपने बॉर्डर के अंदर संपूर्ण अधिकार है. तो वहां पे अगर किसी ने गलत भी किया दूसरे देश के लिए, उसके देश में वो तय कर सकता है कि उसको देना है कि नहीं देना, क्योंकि उसके देश का पूरा कंट्रोल उसके अंदर है, उसके हाथ में. तो ये चीज है. सेकेंडली, ओनली इन एक्सेप्शनल केसेस स्टेट मेक्स एक्स्ट्राडाइट अ पर्सन ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ रेसिप्रोसिटी. ऐसा हो सकता है कि दोनों में ऐसा कंडीशन, ऐसा सहमति बनेगी, ठीक है आप अगर मुझे ये क्रिमिनल दे देते हो तो आपके कंट्री में जो ये क्रिमिनल जो भागा हुआ है हमारे देश से वो हमें दे दोगे, तो हम आपको आपके देश से जो भागा हुआ क्रिमिनल है उसको दे देंगे. देयर माइट बी सम काइंड ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट सपोज इफ समवन हैज रन अवे फ्रॉम योर कंट्री to our country and there is a kind of person who ran away from our country to your country, there can be an understanding that okay, you give us that fugitive who has run away from our country, we'll give you your fugitive. This kind of understanding can happen based upon reciprocity. However, this is not done because of any legal duty on their part. कोई legal duty नहीं, कोई कानूनी उनके ऊपर बाध्यता नहीं है, but because of reciprocity और courtesy, अंडरस्टैंडिंग, फ्रेंडली बिहेवियर, बस इसके कारण वो दे सकते हैं. लेकिन ऐसा अगर ट्रीटी नहीं है तो नहीं कर सकते फोर्सफुली किसी अदर कंट्री को कि आपको देना होगा वो फ्यूजिटिव. ये क्वेश्चन थोड़ा ट्रिकी है और इससे आपको इस क्वेश्चन से क्या समझ में आ रहा है कि आपको इंटरनेशनल लॉ का डेफिनेशन भी पढ़ना होगा, अलग अलग स्कॉलर्स ने जो कहा है. यू विल हैव टू रीड द स्कॉलर्स who have taught, who have explained, who have defined international law. Different scholars have defined international law. You'll have to study. There is no other alternative. You'll have to memorize. Now, here is a tricky question. International law or the law of the nations is a name of the body of rules which, according to the usual definition, regulate the conduct of states. Conduct of states in their intercourse with one another. Now, read this particular line. Professor Oppenheim has defined international law as is the name for the body of customary and conventional rules which are considered legally binding by civilized states in their intercourse with each other. फिर से पढ़ते हैं. International law or the law of the nations is the name of the body of rules which, according to the usual definition, regulate the conduct of states in their intercourse with one another. International law is the name of the body of customary and conventional is not there. In their intercourse with one another. Binding by civilized states is also not there. So don't commit this mistake. You'll have to remember it properly. In my view, this question is not actually a very good question because some students can mistakenly choose Oppenheim, but actually it's not Oppenheim, it's Kelsen who said this. ओपेनहाइम स्टेटमेंट्स कम वेरी क्लोज टू दिस स्टेटमेंट, बहुत क्लोज आता है ओपेनहाइम का जो डेफिनेशन इंटरनेशनल लॉ का, पर ये डेफिनेशन ज्यादा सही केल्सन के लिए, केल्सन ने ऐसा कहा है। ओपेनहाइम ने कुछ फ्रेजेस यूज किए हैं जो उसको डिफरेंशिएट कर सकते हैं। ओपेनहाइम हैज यूज्ड सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ फ्रेजेस टू डिफरेंशिएट बिटवीन व्हाट केल्सन हैज सेड। सी, customary and conventional rules was absent there, civilized states was absent there. See, here you see Hans Kelsen. International law, the law of the nations, is the name of a body of rules which regulate the conduct of states in their intercourse with one another. So this is something you'll have to remember. There is no other option. Secondly, you'll have to remember this particular definition of J.G. Stark. Stark's definition is considered as one of the most comprehensive definition of international law. The reason is he takes three entities and try to encompass within the definition of international law: states, international organizations, and individuals too. See, international law or the law of the nations is the body of rules which regulate the conduct of states in their intercourse with one another. This is Hans Kelsen. What is Stark saying? International law may be defined as that body of law which is composed for its greater part of the principles and rules of conduct which states feel themselves bound to observe and therefore do commonly observe in their relations with each other, and which includes also states. हो गया, states के बारे में Stark ने बोल दिया, but he is also going to include or encompass some more entities. The rules of law relating to the functioning of international institutions. He's talking about international organizations or organizations, their relations with each other and their relations with states and individuals. Certain rules of law relating to individuals and non-state entities so far as the rights or duties of such individuals and non-state entities of the are the concern of international community. So Stark is including three entities: states, the primary actors in international law; international organizations; third is individuals. So this is very important definition. You'll have to remember through the question. You'll have to find what else you need to study. So you need to study the Stark's definition. Here you see what is written. There are two kinds of recognition that takes place in international sphere. One is de jure recognition and another is de facto recognition. What do I mean by that is, a recognition, what happens is, suppose if there is a new country that is coming into existence, एक नया देश आ रहा है, तो उसको बहुत सारे कंट्रीज रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे ऑफिशियली अमेरिका का राष्ट्रपति, द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स वुड से दैट वी रिकॉग्नाइज दिस कंट्री ऑफिशियली। इंडिया के प्राइम मिनिस्टर कहेंगे कि we recognize this country when a new country is coming, like when Bangladesh was created, the Indian prime minister said that we are recognizing Bangladesh. So that was de jure. They are officially taking a position that we are officially recognizing the other state. Then exchange of diplomatic staff will take place. That is de jure, कानूनी तरीके से. de facto का मतलब practical way में, like they are not openly, they are not legally saying that we recognize you, but through their actions they try to say that okay, we recognize you, the new state. That is the difference. वो अपने कर्तव्य, अपने व्यवहार से ये बता देंगे कि हाँ, हम नए स्टेट को मान्यता देते हैं, भले वो नया स्टेट को कानूनी तरीके से वो मान्यता ना दे, वो मतलब पूरी तरह से फॉर्मेलिटी नहीं फॉलो करे, लेकिन वो अपने व्यवहार से ये बता दे कि हाँ, हम उस स्टेट को रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहे हैं. तो इंटरनेशनल लॉ में दो टाइप से रिकॉग्निशन होता है, एक डी फैक्टो और एक डी ज्योरे. डी ज्योरे एकदम कानूनी, एक फॉर्मल वे में हुआ, फॉर्मेलिटी एकदम वहां पे पेपर पे सिग्नेचर हो रहा है, एक्सचेंज ऑफ डिप्लोमेटिक स्टाफ इज टेकिंग प्लेस, दैट इज डी ज्योरे. डी फैक्टो थोड़े अपने व्यवहार से बता रहे हैं कि हाँ, वी रिकॉग्नाइज दैट पर्टिकुलर स्टेट दैट हैज कम इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस. Recognition de jure is final and once given cannot be withdrawn. Correct है, because de jure formal, formally we are recognizing that particular state. Recognition de jure is not final, wrong हो गया. De facto recognition may be withdrawn, of course, because we have not told that we are recognizing that country. We are only through our actions, through our behavior, trying to suggest that we recognize that country. But later on, we can very well say that no, our behavior was understood wrongly. We are not recognizing that particular state. So de facto De facto recognition may be withdrawn. Withdrawal of recognition by a state because that state has ceased to be the state. It's a very confusing statement. Withdrawal of recognition by a state because that state has ceased to be the state. You will have to see this in the last part. Retroactive recognition of a new government does not invalidate the acts of the previous de jure government. मान लेते हैं कि कोई एक पर्टिकुलर गवर्नमेंट आई है अभी और उसको उसके पुराने कुछ काम जो हैं उनको रिकॉग्नाइज किया जा रहा है। अभी जब मैं उनको रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहा हूँ इन डी जीरो मैनर, तो इसके पहले जो गवर्नमेंट थी उसके एक्शंस इनवैलिडेट नहीं हो जाते, वो अपने आप गलत, या उनको मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि उसके पहले जो सरकार थी या इसके पहले जो स्टेट था उसके एक्शंस टोटली इनवैलिडेट हो जाते। दैट विल नॉट हैपन, दैट विल कंटिन्यू टू स्टैंड despite the fact that I'm giving a de jure recognition to a new state. That is something you'll have to remember. What are the options? A, C, and E is the correct. Why? Recognition de jure is final and once given cannot be withdrawn. C, de facto recognition may be withdrawn. E, retroactive recognition of a new government does not invalidate the acts of the previous de jure government. These are the three options which are correct. Why is withdrawal of recognition by a state because that state has ceased to exist to be the state? I'll tell you. In every other option, you will find that withdrawal of recognition by a state because that state has ceased to be the state. What does it mean? Of course, it is not making any sense. Don't touch it. Don't try to touch it. It means withdrawal of recognition by a state because that state had ceased to be the state. So you'll have to find some kind of understanding also when you're trying to find the right answer. According to the strict letters of international law and by the virtue of some conventions in this behalf, it is evident that the withdrawal of de jure recognition is not valid in any case. इंटरनेशनल लॉ के हिसाब से अगर आप डी ज्योरे मैनर में अपना रिकॉग्निशन विड्रॉ कर रहे हैं तो वो एक्सेप्टेबल नहीं है किसी भी केस में. Only those de jure recognitions may be withdrawn where a state subsequently loses an essential of statehood. Statehood के कुछ essential एस्पेक्ट्स होते हैं जो मॉन्टेविडियो कॉन्वेंशन 1933 ने कहा है कि एक स्टेट के चार जैसे कंडीशंस होते हैं, जैसे कि एक कंडीशन है कि स्टेट के पास एक पर्टिकुलर टेरिटोरी होना चाहिए, उसके पास एक परमानेंट पॉपुलेशन होना चाहिए, उसके पास एक गवर्नमेंट होना चाहिए, उसके पास कैपेबिलिटी होना चाहिए कि इट कैन एंगेज इन फॉरेन रिलेशंस with other countries. So these are certain conditions that will have to be fulfilled in order to be called a state. So in that way it is saying that if suppose it loses any essential of statehood, अगर वो चारों conditions में कोई condition नहीं follow कर पाता है, अपना lose कर जाता है under international law where a state having de facto recognition but fails to obtain or fulfill the essential conditions, then the recognition can be withdrawn. The recognition can be withdrawn through declaration or through communicating with the authorities of the recognized state. De jure, which is legal recognition, is a permanent recognition and cannot be withdrawn. The recognition that is conferred by de facto is based on a factual situation and is not a process of law. De jure is recognition given after following due process of law. Diplomats represents are not exchanged in de facto. De jure mein is a recognition given after following the due process of law. So this is something you'll have to remember. De jure is final, de facto is temporary. De jure is about following all the conditions, law and everything. De facto is through behavior, through actions you are trying to suggest that we are recognizing you. That is a very fundamental difference. These kind of questions are very tricky. Actually here I've tried to correct it. It's not port, it's packed. The question was actually, but these kind of questions you will find where some spelling mistakes or some kind of grammatical mistakes will take place. So you'll have to use your mind that it's not Kellogg brand port, but Kellogg brand packed. Or see Treaty of Westphalia. What is here? You will have to discuss about. We'll have to put all of them in a year way, like which happened first and which happened later on. कौन सा पहले हुआ, कौन सा बाद में हुआ, ईयर के हिसाब से हमको अरेंज करना है. ठीक है. ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया, ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया 1648 में हुआ था. ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया ये कहता है कि बिकॉज ऑफ ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया मॉडर्न स्टेट का कॉन्सेप्ट आया. तो ये आपको याद रखना है कि ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया गिव द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ मॉडर्न स्टेट. सो दैट इज 1648 ट्रीटी ऑफ वेस्टफालिया। केलोग ब्रायन पैक्ट 1928 में हुआ था। It tries to say that those states, those parties who are becoming who are signing this Kellogg-Briand Pact promise not to use war to resolve disputes or conflicts of whatever nature or whatever origin they may be, which may arise among them। मतलब अगर आपके जो भी पार्टी साइन कर रहे थे ब्रायन केलॉग पैक्ट, वो ये कह रहे थे कि वो अपनी जितने भी डिस्प्यूट या किसी तरह का तनाव अगर दूसरे देश के साथ होता है तो उसको शांति तरीके से करेंगे, रादर देन गोइंग टू वॉर। लड़ाई करने की जगह पे शांति तरीके से उसको करने की कोशिश करेंगे। तो ये केलॉग ब्रायन पैक्ट हुआ और ये 1928 में हुआ। ब्रुसेल्स कॉन्फ्रेंस एक्ट ऑफ 1890 टॉक्स अबाउट एबॉलिशन ऑफ स्लेवरी, आउटलॉइंग स्लेवरी। स्लेवरी को स्लेवरी जो मतलब होता था उस समय पे, उसको खत्म करने के लिए ब्रुसेल्स कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ 1890 आया। ये आपको ध्यान में रखना है। पुट एन एंड टू नेग्रो स्लेव trade by land as well as by sea and improve the moral and material conditions of existence of the native races। होता क्या था पहले, what used to happen is that people of Africa, they were forcefully taken as slaves, forcefully they were put in chains and they were taken forcefully to European or other European colonies in order to forcefully engage in slavery। So this particular Brussels Conference Act of 1890 was outlawing, trying to put an end to Negro slave trade by land or as well as by sea। अगर मान लेते कि आप किसी को जबरदस्ती, कोई अफ्रीका का उस समय कोई व्यक्ति था, तो उसको जबरदस्ती आप लेके जा रहे हैं ताकि उससे स्लेवरी कराएं, तो वो आउटलॉ किया जा रहा है, उसको गैर कानूनी करवाया जा रहा है एट इंटरनेशनल लेवल। दैट इज ब्रुसेल्स कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ 1890। 1928 केलॉग ब्रायन पैक्ट, Treaty of Westphalia 1648, Treaty of Westphalia is very old, 1648। 1951 convention, what is this 1951 convention? Let us see। Convention on the status of refugees। Provides the internationally recognized definition of a refugee, outlines the legal protection, rights and assistance a refugee is entitled to receive। ये रिफ्यूजी लोगों के लिए 1951 का कॉन्वेंशन आया था। ये 1951 में कॉन्वेंशन किसके लिए आया है? रिफ्यूजीज के लिए। और 1933 में मॉन्टविडियो कॉन्वेंशन, बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट, इंटरनेशनल लॉ में क्वेश्चंस आते रहेंगे, हमेशा आएंगे। और ये डिक्लेरेटिव थ्योरी ऑफ स्टेटहुड की बात करता है। दो टाइप्स के स्टेटहुड होती है, एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव थ्योरी होती है, एक डिक्लेरेटिव थ्योरी होती है। डिक्लेरेटोरी थ्योरी भी किसको कहते हैं वो मैं बताऊंगा बाद में। द फैक्ट इज कि मॉन्टेविडियो convention, you will have to remember it happened in Uruguay in 1933, which talks about what are the essential conditions that an entity has to fulfill in order to become a state। Like it had told how that it has to have a geographical area, it has to have permanent population, it has to have a government, functioning government, it should have the capability and capacity to enter into foreign relations with other countries। So these were the four criteria in order to become a state। If you fulfill these four criteria, you are eligible to become a state, and that is called as declarative theory of statehood। Because there is another theory that is known as constitutive theory, which says that only if other states recognize you as state, then you can be called a state। But declarative theory says no, if I fulfill these conditions, even if other states don't recognize me, I will be a state। That is declarative theory of Montevideo, which talks about declarative theory। It's important, you'll have to remember declarative theory, Montevideo Convention, Montevideo Convention, essential conditions to be fulfilled to become a state। स्टेट को फुलफिल बनने के लिए कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट कंडीशंस है, वो कंडीशंस मॉन्टेविडियो कॉन्फ्रेंस 1933 करता है। उसमें क्या क्या है? एक है कि एक स्टेट बनने के लिए आपके पास एक परमानेंट पॉपुलेशन होना चाहिए, एक आपके पास टेरिटरी होना चाहिए, जगह होनी चाहिए, ज्योग्राफिकल एरिया होना चाहिए, आपके पास एक सरकार होनी चाहिए, आपके पास ऐसा कैपेबिलिटी कैपेसिटी होना चाहिए कि आप दूसरे देशों के साथ फॉरेन रिलेशंस में इंटर कर सकते हैं। ये चार कंडीशन अगर आप फुलफिल करेंगे तभी आप स्टेट बनने के लिए हैं। अगर ये हो जाएगा तो आप डिक्लेरेटिव थ्योरी इसको कहते हैं, क्योंकि अगर उसके लिए मुझे किसी और स्टेट मुझे रिकॉग्नाइज करे तभी मैं स्टेट बनूं, ऐसा नहीं। ये चार कंडीशन फुलफिल करके मैं स्टेट बन गया, दैट इज डिक्लेरेटिव थ्योरी। अगर मेरा स्टेट बनना या ना बनना इज कंटिंजेंट ये इस आधार पे है कि बाकी स्टेट मुझे रिकॉग्नाइज करे कि नहीं करे, दैट इज कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव थ्योरी. इफ अदर स्टेट्स विल रिकॉग्नाइज मी एंड देन ओनली आई बिकम अ स्टेट, दैट विल कम टू constitutive theory. If I myself fulfill all the conditions of the state, then I'll become a state. This is declarative theory. You have to remember these two theories: declarative theory, declaratory theory, constitutive theory. Montevideo Convention talks about declarative theory. If you fulfill these four conditions, you are eligible to become a state. Read it. Which is first? A. Treaty of Westphalia 1648. C. Brussels Conference 1890. B. Kellogg-Briand Pact 1928. D. Convention on the Status of Refugees. It will come at 1951. Montevideo comes in 1933. So E will come first. E is 1933. Convention on the Status of Refugees 1951. So it will come later. Fourth. Here you will have to read these things. Treaty of Westphalia, Kellogg-Briand Pact, Brussels Conference, which outlawed slavery on sea or land, Kellogg-Briand Pact, trying to resolve issues through peaceful means. Treaty of Westphalia, coming of the modern nation state. 1951 Convention on Refugees. 1933 Montevideo Convention with respect to the states. See, these three are very important cases in international law, which when I will be taking the subsequent lectures, I'll explain the entire cases. Here what is important is role of speciality. Role of speciality comes with extradition. What does role of speciality means? Role of speciality क्या है? रोल ऑफ स्पेशलिटी ये कहता है कि अगर एक्स्ट्राडिशन हो रहा है, मैंने बताया था एक्स्ट्राडिशन पे बहुत क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं, देखो दूसरा क्वेश्चन आ गया. रोल ऑफ स्पेशलिटी टॉक्स अबाउट एक्स्ट्राडिशन जो हो रहा है ना, इफ one country is asking another country to hand over a person who is a fugitive, or who has, this country is saying that this particular person has committed criminal acts and should be tried in this country, and is asking this particular country to hand over this particular person to this country. Role of speciality says that this person, if he is extradited, if he is given, if he is handed over by this country to this country in the form of extradition, he should be tried in this country only for those crimes for which this country asked for extradition. ये कंट्री ने ये कह दिया कि ये व्यक्ति ने हमारे देश में या हमारे देश में हम मर्डर ट्रायल इस पे चलाना चाहते हैं, तो ये इसका एक्स्ट्राडिशन इस कंट्री ने इसके ऊपर कर दिया. अब इस देश में इसके ऊपर सिर्फ मर्डर ट्रायल चल सकता है, चोरी का, रेप का, रॉबरी का नहीं चल सकता है ट्रायल, वो गलत हो जाएगा. ये है role of speciality. That is something you'll have to remember. If extradition is taking place, extradition, post extradition, the trials that will take place will only be with respect to those crimes which have been the grounds for extradition. That is role of speciality. Extradition. Packet Havana. Packet Havana is a case, very important case, in which importance of the work of jurist was relied upon, discussed. In international law, at some times, courts can refer to the works of eminent jurist to come to a conclusion. कुछ बहुत ज्ञानी विद्वान टाइप के जो लॉ में हैं जूरिस्ट, उनके ऊपर रिलाई करके भी जजमेंट दिया जाता है. पाकेट हवाना में ऐसा हुआ था. इंपॉर्टेंस ऑफ द वर्क ऑफ जूरिस्ट. Barcelona traction case was given, the judgment was given based upon equity and justice. So you'll have to do this. And D, Nicaragua versus USA. Sources of international law are not hierarchical. Actually, if you read Article 38 of ICJ, International Court of Justice Statute, there are 3 or 4 important प्रोविजंस एस्पेक्ट्स विद इन दैट आर्टिकल 38. और उसमें कहा जाता है कि जैसे पहला कॉन्वेंशंस और ट्रीटीज को दिया जाता है, दूसरे में आ जाते हैं कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ, तीसरे में कि जनरल प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ लॉ रिकॉग्नाइज्ड बाय सिविलाइज्ड नेशन, फोर्स में इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क्स ऑफ जूरिस्ट हैं. तो थर्ड और तो फर्स्ट में जैसे ट्रीटीज आते हैं, सेकंड में कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ आते हैं। तो ये निकारागुआ और यूएस ये कह रहा है कि सोर्सेस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल लॉ नॉट हायरार्कियल, मतलब कि जो कन्वेंशन जो सेकंड आर्टिकल में आईसीजे के 38 आर्टिकल में आईसीजे स्टैट्यूट इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट ऑफ जस्टिस के जो सेकंड उसके जो दूसरे आर्टिकल में उसमें कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल आता है, फर्स्ट आर्टिकल में ट्रीटीज आता है। तो ये कहना चाह रहा है कि सोर्सेस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल लॉ नॉट हायरार्कियल, मतलब सिर्फ इसलिए क्योंकि वो सेकंड में आ रहा है कस्टमरी इंटरनेशनल लॉ, दैट डज नॉट मीन कि इट इज ऑफ लेस इंपॉर्टेंस कंपेयर टू ट्रीटीज। दिस इज निकारागुआ वर्सेस यूएसए with respect to sources of international law not hierarchical. Here I have explained to you already that extradition is the process by which an accused or convicted individual located in one country is surrendered to another country for trial and punishment. The principle of speciality provides that the requesting state is bound to try or punish the extradited offender only for the offense for which he is extradited. That is, a nation that receives a criminal defendant pursuant to an extradition treaty may try that defendant on those offenses for which the other nation granted extradition. Which means कि आप एक्स्ट्राडिशन जब हो रहा है, तो जब एक्स्ट्राडिशन हो गया तो जिस देश में उसका ट्रायल चलने वाला वो उसी क्राइम के ऊपर उसका ट्रायल हो सकता है जिसके आधार पे एक्स्ट्राडिशन हुआ है, नए कोई क्राइम के ऊपर नहीं हो सकता ट्रायल। यहाँ पे ये क्वेश्चन में राइट ऑफ पीएनजी लिखा हुआ है पर ऐसा कोई केस है नहीं। तो एक्चुअली सबसे क्लोज आता है राइट ऑफ पैसेज ओवर इंडियन टेरिटरी विच वाज बिटवीन इंडिया वर्सेस पोर्तुगल, गोवा टेरिटरी पे ऐसा हुआ था। अगेन ये चारों सेम इश्यूज है, ईयर के हिसाब से इनको नंबरिंग करना है। ईयर के हिसाब से जब इनको आप नंबरिंग करते हैं तो क्या होता है कि अलग अलग केस के अलग अलग टाइम है। जैसे न्यूरेमबर्ग जजमेंट है, ये 1945 1946 के टाइम हुआ। एसएस लोटस 1920s के अंदर हुआ था। आइलैंड ऑफ पाल्मास आर्बिट्रेशन केस वो भी उसी टाइम पे हुआ, 1900 अर्ली 1900s में हुआ था। फिशरीज ज्यूरिसडिक्शन मेरिट केम बहुत लेट आया था, 1970s में हुआ था, 1971 में पॉसिबली। तो हम लोग देखते हैं कि कैसे कैसे हुआ। और ये तो राइट ऑफ पैसेज ओवर इंडियन टेरिटरी इंडिया वर्सेस पोर्तुगल 1960 में हुआ था, देख लेते हैं। ये देखते हैं 1974 में हुआ है, यूनाइटेड किंगडम वर्सेस आइसलैंड फिशरीज ज्यूरिसडिक्शन केस, फिशरीज ज्यूरिसडिक्शन जर्मनी वर्सेस आइसलैंड 1974, आइलैंड ऑफ पाल्मास आर्बिट्रेशन केस 1928, न्यूरेमबर्ग जजमेंट 1946, 1960 में इंडिया वर्सेस पोर्तुगल राइट ऑफ पैसेज ओवर इंडियन टेरिटरी, एसएस लोटस केस 1927. I will discuss all these cases in the subsequent lectures. All of these cases are very important from the point of view of international law and they keep coming. Especially this Island of Palmas, Nuremberg trials, right of passage over Indian territory and SS Lotus case. All these four cases are very important. So you can put E, B, C, D, A. E, SS Lotus. B, Island of Palmas arbitration case. C, Nuremberg judgment. D, right of passage 1960. A, fisheries jurisdiction 1974. You remember this, SS Lotus came in 1927 and Island of Palmas arbitration case came in 1928. There are some interesting topics, like SS Lotus talks about how a French and a Turkish ship collide and the Turkish ship people who were there on the Turkish ship lose their lives, and what happens is that it's a very interesting case. Then what happens that when the French ship was close to this was there at the Turkish port, the Turkish authorities arrest the French man of the French ship and then try him, and this is about that case. Then SS Lotus is that only right of passage over Indian territory when Goa was at actually when British gave India independence. Actually, what happened was that, or India got independence by fighting against the Britishers. What happened is that Goa was still under the occupation of the Portuguese, and Portuguese were not willing to give Goa. So what happened was that India stopped their any kind of entry in Goa area via all kinds of, it was India which was surrounding Goa from all sides. So this case concerns that particular area, right of passage over Indian territory. Nuremberg judgment is about crimes against humanity. command responsibility. There are certain aspects of international law. Island of Palmas arbitration case is also very important from the point of view of that you need to assert your sovereignty to hold over a particular territory anywhere in the world, like it was between Netherlands and the US. And then a fisheries jurisdiction case, of course, it's about fishery issue that between two countries borders, United Kingdom versus Iceland, Federal Republic of Germany versus Iceland. So these are fisheries cases. So I told you about Article 38 of the International Court of Justice. You'll have to remember there is no other alternative. आपको Article 38 ICJ का पढ़ना पड़ेगा, कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है, आपको याद करना पड़ेगा, उसके सारे इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल्स याद करने पड़ेंगे. क्या है आर्टिकल 38 clause 2 of the statute of the ICJ states that provision in Article 38 clause 1 shall not prejudice the power of the court a case ex equo et bono if parties agree thereto. Ex equo et bono enable the court to decide upon considerations of fair dealing and good faith, which is independent or even contrary to law. Ex equo et bono का मतलब ये है जब कोई आर्बिट्रेटिव बॉडी, कोई आर्बिट्रेशन बॉडी क्या करती है कि कानून को अलग रख के, कानून को हटाकर, लॉ को हटाकर ये देखने की कोशिश करती है कि सीधे सीधे तरीके से सही क्या है करना, न्याय कहाँ पे है. बहुत बार ऐसा होता है कि लॉ और न्याय जो है वो एक दूसरे से टकराते हैं. तो एक्स एक्स इक्वो एट बोनो कहता है कि लॉ को हटाकर जब न्याय को देखा जाता है, जस्टिस को देखा जाता है, सही देखा जाता है, मोरालिटी को देखा जाता है, तो उसको एक्स एक्वो एट बोनो कहते हैं. तो यहाँ पे ये है कि आर्टिकल 38 क्लॉज 2 ऑफ द स्टैट्यूट ऑफ द आईसीजे स्टेट प्रोविजन इन द आर्टिकल शैल नॉट प्रोड्यूस द पावर ऑफ द कोर्ट इफ पार्टीज एग्री. अगर दोनों पार्टीज जो केस लड़ रही है इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट ऑफ जस्टिस, अगर वो दोनों बात से एग्री करती है कि हम ये प्रिंसिपल लागू करें आईसीजे हमारे केस में, व्हाट इज दैट प्रिंसिपल? एक्स एक्वो एट बोनो, व्हिच सेज दैट set aside the law legal part and give the judgment based upon equity, justice, morality, truthfulness, then this will be acceptable to both parties. Article 38 clause says this. Reason is saying that reason is correct, assertion is also correct, and reason is giving the correct explanation of assertion, so it must be one. Ex equo et bono is a Latin phrase in the context of arbitration. It refers to the power of arbitrators to dispense with consideration of law, but considers solely what they consider to be fair and equitable in the case at hand. ये पावर देता आर्बिट्रेटिव बॉडी को कि लॉ को हटाकर क्या सही है करना, इस तरीके से उस केस को हैंडल किया जाता है. तो इसको एक्स एक्वो एट बोनो कहते हैं. यहाँ पे मैं आर्टिकल 38 के बारे में बता रहा था, ये आपको याद होना चाहिए. यू विल हैव टू मेमोराइज इट, यू विल हैव टू रिमेंबर इट, यू विल हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड इट. आर्टिकल 38 clause 1 of ICJ, International Court of Justice statute, what is it? First talks about how to give judgments. ICJ will, International Court of Justice will rely upon some important things to come or to give judgment, to come at a conclusion. What are these? पहले है international conventions, whether general or particular, establishing rules expressly recognized by the contesting states. It's talking about treaties, समझौते जो देश साइन करते हैं, आपस में एग्री करते हैं. पहला है इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशंस. सेकेंड इज इंटरनेशनल customary international law. I told you, remember, first is coming treaties, second is coming customary international law. But in one of the judgment, what did ICJ said? Just because customary international law is coming later to treaties, that does not mean that customary international law is subservient to treaties. They are equally important. Remember this. Third is the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. Actually it has European connotations. Civilized nations, subject to the provisions of Article 59, judicial decisions and the teachings of the most highly qualified publicists of various nations of subsidiary means for the determination of rules of law. Paket Habana, jurist. This is in the fourth option, but it's the least importance. Here, these three are the most important. What are those three? treaties, customary international law, and the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. But prominently, these two, customary international law and treaties, they are at equal footing, and so is the general principles of law. Only the uh, writings of jurists and the very highly scholarly people will be a bit subservient to these three. This provision shall, what is the second clause that we were talking about right now? This provision shall not prejudice the power of the court to decide a case ex equo et bono if the parties agree thereto. That is, if the both the parties who are in front of the court are saying that okay, decide our case based upon justice and equity rather than law, then the ICJ can do that, setting aside all these things. That is that what is read. Shall not prejudice the power of the court to decide a case ex equo et bono if the parties agree thereto. What is Article 59 saying? The decision of the court has no binding force except between the parties and in respect of that particular case. It's talking about, we know, like when a higher judiciary gives a judgment, it's a binding upon not only those parties, but it becomes a law. That is what he's saying. It doesn't happen that way. That particular judgment will only apply to those parties. That judgment will only apply to those parties and to that particular case itself. That is what Article 59 of ICJ statute says. Here there is a question. It's a very general knowledge question, but it will come within international law. International Bank of Reconstruction and Development is called the World Bank. Correct. Not technically correct, but correct here. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is also called the International Monetary Fund. Wrong. The Drunken Draft embodies the results of the Tokyo round. Wrong. Uruguay round. WTO, World Trade Organization. GATT. It was because of Drunken Draft that happened. So you'll have to remember this. WTO provides for the secretariat headed by the Director General. Correct. WTA provides a secretary headed by Secretary General. No. United Nations provides for a secretariat headed by a Secretary General. So WTA provides for a secretariat headed by a Director General. D is correct. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is also called the International Monetary Fund. Wrong. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is called the World Bank. So A and D are correct. You see here, you'll have to remember, World Bank group consists of 5 different bodies. One of them is IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Second important body is International Development Association. These two are very important. International Finance Corporation, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. So there are 5 bodies within World Bank Group. So you'll have to remember that. Generally, what happens, people often use interchangeably IBRD, which is the most important body of World Bank, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development of the World Bank. That's why you see International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is an international financial institution established in 1944, headquartered in Washington DC, United States. It's the lending arm of the World Bank Group. कर्जा देने के लिए ये वर्ल्ड बैंक ग्रुप का एक बॉडी है जो कर्जा देता है देशों को फॉर रिकंस्ट्रक्शन एंड डेवलपमेंट. Drunken proposal. Actually, what had happened is that for World Trade Organization negotiations were taking place, but they were breaking down. So Drunken gave a proposal, and based upon his proposal, means like at the Uruguay round, means like some things could materialize, which led to the foundation of World Trade Organization. And World Trade Organization is headed by World Trade Organization has a secretariat which is headed by Director General, not Secretary General. The question here has written, again, everywhere you find red, I have tried to correct it because the spelling or something is very confusing. Actually, it's Eichmann, not Alkaman, that is written in the question. Anglo-Norwegian fisheries, again the same type of case, like the cases and their years, they are asking for this. See, United Kingdom versus Norway, it's about Anglo-Norwegian fisheries case. It's very important from the point of view of public or international law. Like it's about like if a state is objecting to what do you call, it's objecting, it is reserving its view on a particular customary international law, it's objecting, then if there is a permanent objecting rule, then that state will be exempted from that customary international law. So that is in this United Kingdom versus Norway. Eichmann case is very important. It took place in Israel. What had happened is that Eichmann was a Nazi and he was arrested and brought in Israel. and then he was tried in Israel. So that was 1961. It includes a lot of issues with respect to crimes against humanity, crimes against the Jewish people. At that time, Israel was not in existence. So how to bring him to justice? Many issues are there. The United Kingdom versus Iran, 1952. It's about the oil nationalization took place in the Iran when Iranian government took over. A new government had come, and it nationalized all the oil facilities within Iran, and there were some oil facilities which are run by the companies of United Kingdom. So that's why this is a case. Then Chorzo factory case, again it's an indemnity case. Indemnity case I'll explain in later on. Advisory opinion on Western Sahara with respect to borders and the successive states that come out of colonialism. So these are the things. But you see the years. Eichmann case 1961, United Kingdom versus Iran 1952, Chorzo factory case 1928, advisory opinion on Western Sahara 1975, United Kingdom versus Norway 1951, and based upon DBCAE. So how are you going to put chronologically? The case that came first will be first, the case that came last will be last. This is how you are going to put all of them. This is again a definition type of international law, and you'll have to remember it. There is no other way. And this grand function of the law of nature was discharged in giving birth to modern international law. It was said by Henry Maine, a person who is considered as one of the very important proponent of English school of historical school of jurisprudence. The grandest function of the law of nature was discharged in giving birth to modern international law and to the modern law of war, but this part of its effects must here be dismissed with consideration very unequal to its importance. Said by Henry Maine. The principle of just cogence is incorporated in which article of the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties? The most important article of Vienna Convention of Law of Treaties in my view, ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल है और इसका है आंसर आर्टिकल 53। ये आपको पता होना चाहिए। वियना कन्वेंशन ऑन लॉ ऑफ ट्रीटीज मैंने पहले बताया कि वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट है। उसमें मेरे इन माय व्यू, मेरे हिसाब से आर्टिकल 53 सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल है वियना कन्वेंशन ऑन द लॉ ऑफ ट्रीटीज। ये क्या कहता है? ये कहता है आर्टिकल 53 ऑफ द वियना कन्वेंशन is the origin of the principle of just cogence. It states that a treaty is void if at the time of its conclusion it conflicts with the pre-emptory norm of general international law. Pre-emptory norm is also known as just cogence. अगर कोई समझौता दो देशों के बीच में हो रहा है, अगर वो if it violates the just cogence, तो होगा क्या कि it will be not valid as per Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Then this is something Uniting for Peace resolution. You'll have to study this Uniting for Peace resolution with respect to General Assembly, what has happened. Uniting for Peace is a very important resolution of United Nations General Assembly. You'll have to remember certain important points. United Nations General Assembly Resolution 377A, Uniting for Peace resolution, ये कहता है कि अगर सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल में with respect to peace, मेंटेनेंस ऑफ पीस मैंने बताया था कि इज द रिस्पांसिबिलिटी ऑफ यूनाइटेड नेशन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल। अगर यूनाइटेड नेशन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल फेल होती है अपनी रिस्पांसिबिलिटी को फुलफिल करने में, तो जनरल असेंबली कैन आल्सो अज्यूम दैट रोल। दैट इज व्हाट यूनाइटेड नेशंस United for Peace resolution talks about. You see, A, B, and D are correct. United for Peace resolution was passed in 1950, correct. Uniting for Peace resolution was passed by the General Assembly, correct. Uniting for Peace resolution was passed by the Security Council, no, wrong. Maintenance of international peace and security is a primary responsibility of the Security Council, yes. United Nations Charter says that. Maintenance of international peace and security is a primary responsibility of the General Assembly, no, wrong. But if Security Council fails in that responsibility, then as per Uniting for Peace resolution, General Assembly can assume that role. That is what it's saying. This is again year issue. Kyoto Treaty on Climate Change, second, 1997, Kyoto Protocol. Then is B3, you see International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of the Families, B3, 1990. And then SAARC Accord on Extradition, 1987. The C4, WTO came into force in the year 1995. D1. Nothing to discuss here, just a simple answer. This question is important and you'll have to remember this. We are approaching at the end. You see, treaties may be terminated, treaties cannot be terminated, treaties may be terminated. Treaties may be terminated by operation of law and by acts of state parties. Importing of performance of a treaty is on a ground for termination of the, actually what had happened here is that what they did was this question was dropped by UGC net. The reason being that the options were not correct, they were not put in the right manner. So I will leave this particular question, and what I will suggest here is that you will have to read the termination of treaties clauses in the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties. See this indicate the chronological order of the fling. See how many places the same issue is coming up time and again with respect to the year and the convention, year and the case. Time and again chronological order is coming. Very simple. Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide, 1948, it was signed. Warsaw Pact, 1955. Montreal Convention of Hijacking, 1971. Convention on the Rights of the Child, 1989. Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1961. Simple. Based upon that, you can solve the questions. First will be A, Genocide Convention 1949, B, Warsaw Pact 1955, then E, Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations 1961, UN Convention, then C, Montreal Convention of Hijacking 1971, and then UN Convention on the Rights of the Child 1989, the latest. Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter contains the proposition of unilateral use of force or threat theory by states in their international relations. There are, you see here, you'll have to remember Article 2, Clause 1 of UN Charter, Article 2, Clause 4 of UN Charter, Article 2, Clause 7 of UN Charter. It's very important. Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter contains the proposition of unilateral use of force or threat theory by states in their international relations. There are no exceptions to the above. UN Charter makes an exception to 2, Clause 4 in individual and collective self defense as in Article 51. Correct. You see, states have a duty to refrain from propaganda for wars of aggression. Of course, they have a right. States may use or encourage the use of economic and political measures to coerce another state. Of course, unacceptable. So wrong. So only A, C and E are correct. Why? You see here, Article 2, Clause 4, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. That means a state should not threaten another state with force. Article 2, Clause 4. Article 2, Clause 1, sovereign equality. All states are equal, big or small, large or small. Article 2, Clause 7 defends countries or states with respect to their domestic jurisdiction, non-interference by the United Nations. See, except the application of enforcement measures under Chapter 7. Article 51 talks about right of individual or collective self-defense. You'll have to read this. Article 2, Clause 1, Article 2, Clause 4, Article 2, Clause 7, Article 2, Clause 1, sovereign equality. Article 2, Clause 4, cannot use force against another states. Article 2, Clause 7, domestic sovereignty, jurisdiction, non-interference in the domestic aspects of the states. That is Article 2, Clause 1, 2, Clause 4, 2, Clause 7. Article 51, collective self-defense. Very important article of UN Charter. You'll have to remember this. So actually this was for today, and we'll discuss more questions in the subsequent lectures. And this is how it's going to be. I'm going to tell you how to study, how to prepare, but try to learn through the questions. Okay, don't try to only get the answers. Try to understand all the options. Try to see what is the examination trying to ask you. Extradition, important. UN Charter, Preamble, Article 2, important. Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, important. Important international cases and their years, important. This is how you are going to study. Then you will get an idea, overview, how to prepare for the examination. So this is for today, and I hope you understood a lot from these questions, and I will be coming with more and more subsequent lectures, whereby we will be discussing more and more questions in order to understand and try to understand how UGC net law thinks for us when it is preparing the law paper. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.